Welcome to the Christchurch Fox Chapel podcast. It's the fastest growing conservative, evangelical, charismatic,
oracular
podcast in the entire Fox Chapel area. You like a good oracle, don't you, Ben?
I love a good oracle. Yeah. That's what we're all about here.
So back in the day, in the sort of 80s, we had a thing called teletext. So the BBC had news that it would put out on the TV that you could read on the screen, like a kind of really basic website, but it was transmitted over air as text to your TV.
So you couldn't scroll through it. It would just like have the...
Oh, it was totally irritating. It had like 200 pages. And so it would scroll for you. So you had to read really quickly.
You had to catch up in the middle of it.
It was an absolute nightmare.
And this was the news.
Yeah. And then ITV, which was Channel 3, when a third channel was launched, they launched their own version, a rival to teletext, and it was called Oracle.
Oracle.
Yeah. And you could get the oracles of the day.
That's the oracles of the day.
Yeah, yeah.
The 80s.
Yeah.
The 80s. I was alive for a whole 2 months of the 80s. No, just about 1 month, actually.
I did the whole
80s.
thing.
You did the whole thing?
I did the whole thing.
Straight through,
start to finish. Did the whole decade.
Well, the 90s were really where it was at, but
they were the best. So oracles. We don't really think of oracles very much unless you happen to get your news from the 1980s.
No, it has kind of a the term oracle sort of has either makes us nowadays think of a software company or of a mystical kind of
He-Man. There was an oracle in He-Man.
We think of oracles as something that we can't inherently rely on. It's just like some sort of, I think there's a bias against them in our culture.
Right. Well, anything sort of mystical feels like a conspiracy theory or some sort of crackpot idea.
Yeah.
And I guess that's the point, that sometimes, many of the prophets look like crackpots.
Yes.
So these are oracles of doom.
Point.
This is a classic doom oracle.
Oh.
Is Amos.
Yeah, we're starting a new series that we should probably mention that.
The new series of Amos.
Yeah, so we've just had a nice restful Christmas break. I hope everyone had a restful Christmas break. Lovely. We're actually recording this before Christmas, but that's all right.
But it's now the new year.
It's now the new year.
Well, we're doing this in a sort of oracular way.
Yeah. I see what you mean.
We're looking ahead.
We are. I am predicting that we will have a new series on Amos in 2025.
But no earthquake, I hope.
I hope not. But yeah, so it's a new series. Amos is it's one of the books of one of the 39 books of the Old Testament, and he is one of the minor prophets. And what does that mean again for the listeners? So
we've got major prophets. These are people like Isaiah or Isaiah. They're big, long books. The minor prophets are small and often more concentrated on one particular theme. And Amos is one of the earliest.
Yeah, if not the earliest.
Right.
Well, it's a tie between Amos, Joel, and Hosea, I think. And they're like in the 700s BC.
Yeah, so, with Amos, we're able to kind of pinpoint his time a little bit more accurately than many because he mentions certain things like an earthquake. And he mentions different kings. We'll come to this in a moment, but he mentions more than one king. So you can look at when King A and King B lived and see what the overlap was between them. And that narrows down the time a lot.
Yeah.
So Amos is a minor prophet. He's concentrated on really a basic theme. And we've called this series God in the Gathering Storm.
Yes.
It checks all of the boxes.
The Gathering Storm.
The Gathering Storm.
The Gathering Storm.
It's very Churchillian.
It's very it's literally ripping off the title of Churchill's books.
It is
book series. He wrote
The Gathering Storm.
Yeah, he wrote over how many books was it?
I think 5. I think
he was the one that said history will treat me kindly because I intend to write it.
I
intend to write it.
Churchill was brilliantly talking about what it was like in Gathering Storm to be a doom oracle in Parliament when appeasement was the idea for Mr. Hitler. And people thought, well, we've had the horrors of the First World War.
Yeah.
That we can't possibly do this again. He looked like a bit of a fool, but he said there's a storm gathering in Europe.
Yeah.
And history proves that he was correct.
But everything at the time looked great. There was a sense of maybe perhaps there was some optimism. And that's the case for Israel at the time that Amos is writing.
Yeah.
Right? It's the 770s. He's writing... he's speaking rather. He's the shepherd of Tekoa. We read in verse 1, which Tekoa is a couple miles south of Jerusalem.
So it's very near to a place of great significance, Jerusalem.
Yeah.
Jerusalem being the location of the temple, the location of the palaces of the Davidic kings.
Yeah.
It's, we know from the New Testament this is where the crucifixion takes place. This is a big deal.
Yeah,
but Tekoa is not a big deal. Tekoa.
We had to look it up.
We had to look up Tekoa, and the main point about Tekoa is that it's Nowheresville.
Yeah, and we've been referring to him as the shepherd of Tekoa, but actually he's one of the shepherds of Tekoa.
He was among the shepherds. He wasn't even a shepherd.
He's not even like the guy. He's just like, he's a nobody. He's like, he's definitely from Butler. Actually, this is more Washington, PA, or something like that, or like,
and then even then, you don't quite get the notion. In a modern republic like America, no one's above the law. We're all equal, right?
Yeah.
But that was not the case then. There was a very stratified society, and a shepherd or sheep raiser or sheep dealer or sheep tenderer, a herdman, they were marked out as being humble guys. As you said in your sermon 3 weeks ago, not last week.
Oh yeah, that one 3 weeks ago.
You can cast your mind all the way back.
That wasn't yesterday at all.
It wasn't.
No,
but there were shepherds in the hills. Probably the same hills.
Goodness,
there were shepherds near Bethlehem, which is very close to Tekoa, in the hills.
Yeah.
And shepherds were dirty people. They were often ritually impure because they could not participate in the ceremonial rites of the temple. They were up at night when things got stolen, and shepherds were often blamed, whether they did it or not. Don't get bogged down in that. They weren't thought of highly, and they were robust characters. They probably had, an earthy turn of phrase.
Yeah, I do want to give a shout out to a one person who had a pretty interesting insight, not yesterday, but 3 weeks ago. Wink, wink. But like just that God does feature the idea of a shepherd quite often.
Yeah.
Because shepherding and caring for a community or for God's people can be very similar. So sometimes the king is described as a shepherd. David's described as a shepherd. Yeah. He is a shepherd, but then God himself is described as a shepherd sometimes. Jesus calls himself the good shepherd.
Yeah.
But that does not mean that I think that there's a point being made in that, because shepherds were not thought of as being particularly, it wasn't like a classy vocation. Like,
not in the slightest.
It's like God describing himself as like a, I don't know, subsistence farmer.
So in the highly cultic environment of the Old Testament and Old Covenant temple worship, with the Levitical priestly tribe maintaining the work of the temple, and with the Davidic kings ruling the nation.
Yeah.
You have this idea of a shepherd coming from nowhere with a bit of a nothing job and speaking oracles to the people is a remarkable inversion of what would be expected. Now, it's a theme that we see developed throughout Scripture a lot. I mean, John the Baptist roaming around looking weird, and even Jesus himself being born in a manger. These kind of things. This is very reminiscent of lots of themes in Scripture.
Well, most societies think that it's the urban elites who then get to determine things for the rural, backwards people.
Yeah,
and so the Bible, which is constantly inverting things, often has this sort of thing where an outsider comes and speaks into the urban religious political center.
Luke Skywalker from Tatooine. These are the heroes are often
goodness.
from, that's right, the scruffy planet from the outer reaches of the galaxy.
We can do a total thing about like biblical themes that are kind of like
it's all over.
snake their way into Star Wars.
All over our literature. I mean, what's Frodo?
Yeah.
Baggins,
Yeah.
or Bilbo. What are they? I mean, they're from the Shire. This is a well-established theme, isn't it, throughout our literature and movies?
And, well, it's because Tom Holland would say that, not the Spider-Man guy, but the author, that's because we live in a society that is fundamentally Christian in its origins, and inescapably so. We're all reacting against Christianity.
Well, there's another thing that Tom Holland likes, Ben, and that's A Gathering Storm.
A Gathering Storm.
He loves A Gathering Storm.
He loves A Gathering Storm.
Actually, the year-end reviews have come in for our podcast.
Have they?
We haven't actually competed that well with The Rest is History.
Have we? Have we not?
But it is, I think, one of the podcasts that our listeners most listen to alongside ours.
Is it really?
Yeah.
That's probably because that's probably referring to the two people who are skewing that stat are you and me.
Yeah, that's it. No, there's a lot of people who've done a deep dive through that podcast. The Rest is History. And
we commend it to you.
they love A Gathering Storm on The Rest is History.
They do. It's important, Alex.
It's important, Dominic.
It's important.
Oh, we like A Gathering Storm,
We
don't
love
we,
A Gathering
Tom?
Storm.
All right, so
I
we
think
must not try and become them.
I think I'm the who are we in that in comparison to that? That's not relevant to our topic here.
No, neither of us is wearing a nice suit right now, so it's definitely not us.
Can I just ask one question?
Yeah.
So we're doing, and maybe you don't want to talk about this yet, but we're doing Amos in 2025, and it's kind of like, so what's the thought that goes in? Can we just talk about what the thought is that goes into like why we pick certain books when, and and what the relevance to our own cultural moment could perhaps be? We can speculate on that.
Sure, absolutely. It's dividable into the same number of weeks as there are between Epiphany and Holy Week.
Yeah, there's that.
So there is that. In all seriousness,
and we haven't taught it before.
we haven't taught it before.
Those are two huge things, actually.
Ideally, it would actually fit in terms of the amount of time we have for it. Ideally, we would teach on the full counsel of God.
Yeah.
So we believe that all Scripture is God-breathed and is profitable for teaching and rebuking and training in righteousness. So we want, ideally, to teach through everything and not just skip strange books.
Yeah.
Because it would be tempting or easy to say, well, look, we're just going to do Luke and Galatians all the time. Well, sometimes it's good to teach on a less well-known, less popular book like Amos. That's one thing.
Yeah.
There's a lot to be learned from this because the cultural setting of Amos, I think, is very similar to where we are today.
How so?
Well, so there are problems beneath the surface that we'll get into in a moment in the Holy Land, in the Promised Land, and we'll get into those in just a second. But notwithstanding the really serious endemic problems that are baked into their society, it's nonetheless a time of relative prosperity and peace.
Yeah.
And that's the case for us. I mean, we have a stable system. We've not had a world war since our granddad's era.
I don't think very few living people now lived through the Second World War.
Right. My parents were born just at the very end of it. So very, very few people have lived through an enormously global conflict like that.
Yeah.
So a period of relative stability and peace. That's where we are. Period of progress. I mean, we've had all sorts of medical advances and transportation advances, and you look at people's homes. I love cars. You know that. I mean, you look at a Porsche from the 1960s, compare it to one today, and the new one's about 3 times as heavy, twice as wide. It's full of technology. The old thing was, rough and ready.
Yeah.
And you see this prosperity. We've become bloated as a culture. We've become soft.
Yeah.
We don't know how to make our own food. We don't know, how to fix stuff.
Yeah.
We have a very disposable attitude. You go into Lowe's or something and buy an appliance, and they'll sell you a 5-year warranty.
Yeah.
Because they know it's going to break in the 6th year. Whatever. It's so funny.
I bought a dishwasher a year ago, and it's already starting to break.
I bought a dishwasher 2 years ago, and all the trim's come off. Yeah.
Yeah. But I think that it's an interesting cultural moment that we're in.
Yeah, I do too.
And, there's simultaneously, I sense that on the left, the cultural left, there seems to be maybe a sense of fear and pessimism. On the cultural right, there's this extreme optimism right now because Trump just won the election in the USA. Right. Yeah, that's the context that I know. And so there's this there's a kind of a swirling current of nobody's really sure if there's doom on the horizon or if there's kind of up and up material and otherwise prosperity. Or is it sort of, is it morning in America or is it evening in America? And well, that's up for debate, but our job is not to be political commentators, but to rather look, how do we, yeah, go ahead.
Well, how genuine is it though? How genuine is the feeling on the left that there's this great doom? I mean, you got someone like, Ellen DeGeneres saying, I'm leaving, right? So you can say, well, okay, that's genuine, unless she's fleeing something else.
Sure.
But you can say, well, okay, well, she's put her money where her mouth is, right? She's on the political left. She hates the idea of Trump. She's moved to England. She's now living in the Cotswolds, which is lovely. Okay. But half the country did not vote for him. Well, that's not even true. Half the people who voted didn't vote for him, right? They haven't left the country.
Sure.
They're still going around buying new cars and buying food. They've got enough groceries in their freezer, but what they're not doing is prepping, right? Yeah. They aren't building nuclear bunkers or fleeing to Canada. So when you actually test it, you realize that people don't really think that this is an existential end to the United States. No. Because if they did think that, they would do something about it. You've got the same thing that happened in Germany as Hitler came to power. Right? I'm not likening any of our politicians to him. But when Hitler came to power, the Jews left in waves. But the vast majority did not leave. And they did not leave because they thought, well, this will blow over. It can't possibly be that bad. The warnings are ridiculous. I'm all right. I've been all right so far.
Yeah.
And so, and we know what came. So I think this notion of being comfortable right now makes it very difficult for us as humans to believe that doom really is that likely in the coming year, or that even possible.
Well, we live in a society that's largely comfortable, but we all have the reality of death coming at us.
Right.
And that's not like speculative. That's like, unless the Lord comes back, that's fact.
Right.
And so in a sense, the reality of judgment, because death is a consequence of sin, right? It's the wages of sin. That is judgment. It is in the horizon for every individual.
Right.
And geopolitically, there's a lot we just don't really know. I mean, I feel like I have like two different minds as I read the news. There's the part of me that's like, oh, well, maybe I need to really pay attention to these developments in AI and, all this stuff. Is life going to continue on like it always has for my lifetime? Or is there going to be a radical interruption? I don't know.
Right.
But
there's something about the way you're living that proves roughly what you're thinking, right? I mean, so I can say this now because, it's after Christmas. I bought my kids a wristwatch for Ben, really nice one, and for Hannah, laptop, right? I didn't buy them fishing line, survival bag, iodine tablets, night sight goggles.
That's what I want for Christmas.
Well, all those things sound great. But there's if you look at our financial priorities, you would say to us, we are banking upon the United States carrying on more or less next year as it did last year. Right? Might be a bit better, might be a bit worse, but we're not thinking about an existential upending of the social order.
Yeah.
Or even upending of the physical world. We're not thinking of that a sinkhole will appear and the US will collapse into it.
Yeah.
But Amos is speaking at a time of prosperity like ours, and he is saying a sinkhole will appear. So the gathering storm, it's a motif that just about appears in the book. In chapter 3, we get talk of tumult.
Yeah.
We get waters rising. Justice rolls like waters. That's a famous verse. We get Carmel withering. We get pastures withering. We get this idea of an earthquake. So we get the idea that there will be fire and water and shaking and chaos coming. And that, in a literal sense, is true. We also know that in a metaphorical sense, that the great political powers of the age will range against God's people and come and get them as well. And so this is a well-established pattern in the Old Testament prophets, that enemy forces are likened to natural pests and natural disasters.
Yeah. And so altogether, the larger picture is a storm of judgment.
A storm of judgment is coming, and it feels difficult to believe that it could be true because we're in a time of relative prosperity and peace. And therefore, prosperity and peace is actually a bit of a dangerous place to be.
So in preaching through this, are we saying that there is a storm of judgment coming?
For us?
For our society?
Yes and no.
Yes and no.
Yeah. I mean, yes, there is. And yes, it's already here in a sense. And yes, it's coming more. And yes, we're saved from it.
Yeah. Expound on that. That's an interesting way.
Well, it's Jesus.
Yeah.
But actually, before we get there, right? Before we get to Jesus,
okay, yeah,
he is the punchline of every sermon. Otherwise, it's not a sermon. But it's worth noting that there are actually some really serious endemic problems that would be visible if you thought about them for a moment. So, chapter 1, verse 1, the words of Amos, who was among the shepherds of Tekoa, which he saw concerning Israel in the days of Uzziah, king of Judah, and in the days of Jeroboam, the son of Joash, king of Israel.
Okay, so this is the two kingdoms have split at this point.
Yeah, there are two kings of Israel.
Yeah. Why
are there two kings of Israel? Because Israel has become two kingdoms. So this is a little bit complex because of the language used, right? So Israel was the promised land with 12 tribes in it. 11.
David became king.
Yeah.
Passed it on to his son Solomon.
Right.
After that, things fragmented.
So the kingdom actually divided into two chunks. The big kingdom in the north was basically all the tribes except for Judah. And it was known as Israel, unhelpfully. So Israel became two kingdoms, one of which was called Israel. And in Israel, in the north, you have Jeroboam. He's the king. In the south, you have Judah, which was a tribe. Judah, often in the prophets, is also sometimes called Israel, because really it is the true descendant of Israel.
They're the good. They're more. Well, they're not the good guys, but they're the less bad guys than the north.
Yeah.
Judah on the whole was slower to apostatize.
Yeah, it died slower.
Yeah, it died slower.
Okay, so you've got Israel in the north, Judah in the south. Yeah. In some of the documents, you'll hear both of them referred to as Israel, which is a little confusing. But we're going to try and call the northern kingdom Israel. And we're going to try and call the southern kingdom Judah, as much as we can to distinguish.
Yeah.
So Israel in the north, Judah in the south, the kingdom is divided. That's a terrible thing because it's supposed to be a united kingdom. It's supposed to be God's promised land. It's not supposed to be two rival kingdoms.
Kingdom. I see what you did there.
Oh, yeah, well, there you go then. Of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. So it's not supposed to be a divided kingdom. It's supposed to be a united kingdom.
Okay.
So you've got two rival kingdoms within the contiguous landmass formerly known as Israel. And that's a problem. But they don't seem to be viewing this as a problem because everything's fine. They've got money, they've got food, things are going well, they've got relative peace, the enemies are relatively subdued. I mean, there's a lot of enemies around, but they're not coming into the promised land, so I'm all right. Who cares whether there's something a bit skew-whiff and wonky in terms of our practices, and who cares whether there's something wrong with our politics? Who cares whether there's something wrong with our religion? We've got money. We're fine.
Well, that's the thing. I think maybe this is a real translation point into our sort of place where we live in the West, is that economics and politics have kind of largely taken over as more important than religious matters because we're in a society that's so technologized that we feel like we're self-sufficient. And so long as as Israel and Judah were kind of, everything was going well, there wasn't really a sense of need for God. But God speaks through Amos into that sort of self-sufficiency and says, hey,
trouble is brewing.
There's a storm on the horizon.
There's a storm, Dominic. And I don't think that they can see they can't see it coming, which is why God sends an oracle.
Yeah.
And it's difficult for them to accept. Now, we know that it was true. We know both that there was an actual earthquake. He says this happened 2 years before the earthquake. Well, archaeologists tell us there really was an earthquake, and Zechariah tells us there was an earthquake. So there really actually was one.
Yeah.
And the earthquake is probably symbolic, like most of these things, of the judgment of God.
Yeah. And I mean, natural disasters God does this. There is significance in everything.
Yeah.
We have to be careful nowadays in like drawing out that we know what that significance is. But
God sends an Old Testament prophet with the authority to write scripture and speak for him.
Yeah.
And says there's an earthquake coming, and then an earthquake comes. So we can definitely say that this is deliberate, and we can verify. Not only can we pinpoint the date of Amos, but we can verify that he's a reliable person because archaeologists show us it actually happened at this time.
Go figure.
Okay. So he said, and this is a section now on about judgment on Israel's neighbors.
Yeah.
So this is interesting because we've kind of given the game away a little bit. We know that this is a warning to Israel in the north and Judah in the south. We know that because it's an Old Testament book, so it has to be. But as they are reading this, first off, it begins with judgment on Israel's neighbors. So it's quite a popular thought. You know all those bad guys, the tribes that are surrounding you, and there are many, right? There's Gaza, there's Tyre, there's Edom, there are Ammonites, there are Moabites. There are lots of tribes around, enemies. And God is judging them, which is what we would call an A doctrine. It's a good sell. It's a popular idea. People are going to be with Amos. They're going to be like, yeah!
Yeah. The crowd is cheering through all of this because it's like if you go into any sort of left or right leaning political group and you start bashing the opposite side, people are going to be with you. But then he like gradually moves the crosshairs
or if you go
onto them.
Or if you go to any place in the entire known world and talk smack about France, everyone will be with you. We can all agree.
Even France?
Well, yeah. They just talk about Parisians, but it's the same principle. So, yeah. For the record, I like the French. So he says here, which is a bit of a shameful thing to say as a Brit.
You could be cancelled for that.
Yeah. I'll take it. Their cheese is good, so is their wine.
Yeah.
They're very nice people, and they're good drivers. So the Lord roars from Zion. Here's a fascinating thing. God roars from Zion, which is what's the mountain that Jerusalem is on.
Yeah, Jerusalem is built on a couple of mountains, but Zion is where the temple is, Mount Zion. And so Zion became the image for like kind of the exalted place where God's presence dwelled.
So God's people are established in the promised land. Zion, Mount Zion becomes the focal point, the holy hill of the Lord, Psalm 24.
Yeah.
It becomes the place where the palace of David is. It becomes the place where the temple is. Jerusalem does. It becomes the heart of Israel, the United Kingdom.
And the Lord roars from there.
And he utters his voice from Jerusalem. Yeah, he roars.
It's like a lion, kind of the Lion of Judah, I guess.
The Lion of Judah roars. This prowling, powerful, majestic king of the beasts is speaking. He's a dangerous animal who devours.
I love what C.S. Lewis says. Like, is he a tame lion?
No,
no, he's good, but he's not tame. And then he roars, and
so this is interesting because there's a tiny little repudiation of the divided kingdom here, because God isn't speaking from whatever the political epicenter of Israel in the north is and from the political epicenter of Judah. It's not a joint statement from allies.
So he's not in a universal...
He's picked a side.
Yeah, he's picked a side.
Seemingly.
He's exclusive.
Seemingly. Well, he is exclusive. He's picked a side seemingly. There's a lot of layers to this.
Yeah.
Judah does not get away with it.
No.
But I would say this is certainly a repudiation of the kingdom of the north, because God is still speaking from where he always has spoken from, as a lion.
the pastures of the shepherds mourn. Mm-hmm. This is verse 2. And the top of Carmel withers.
What are we talking about here?
Mount Carmel, not Carmel. Not like the stuff that that you guys all ate over Christmas a lot, but like that's caramel. Mount Carmel, about 100 years before this, in about the 850s.
Right, really significant moment.
There's this really significant moment where Elijah. He's confronting the wickedness of Israel, the northern kingdom, specifically the king Ahab, and they had
and his cohort Jezebel.
Yeah, and his cohort Jezebel. And Ahab and Jezebel were idolaters. They were trusting in Baal or Baal or...
the most wicked of leaders.
Yeah. Yes, exactly.
Worshipping a false god with an elaborate system of prophets of Baal.
Yeah.
Who were establishing and maintaining an entire religious system that revolved around this evil god Baal. Child sacrifice, perhaps, certainly to Molech there was.
You get the sense there's some elaborate liturgy going on.
There's all sorts of sexual depravity associated with Baal, and his Baal has a cohort, Asherah. So you've got a wicked, murderous queen who's pulling the levers of power, manipulating a somewhat weak husband, Ahab, surrounded by a powerful, well-entrenched system of religion that persecutes the people of God. And the prophets of God are in hiding, for the most part, at this phase in Israel history.
Yeah.
And the worship in Israel of Baal is focused in particular on a mountain in the north by the sea called Carmel. Mm-hmm. So it's a tale of two mountains. We have Mount Zion, which is the actual place in Judah where God reigns. And we have a fake sort of system that's focused upon Mount Carmel in the north. So historical site associated with false worship.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's God's worship that is happening according to God's testimonies and his choosing versus human-made worship happening on the top of Mount Carmel.
Yeah, and it says the top of Mount Carmel withers. So this is where you're going with the Baal stuff, I guess.
Yeah. So there's a famous episode. Is this in 1 Kings 19, I think?
Yeah.
Where Elijah basically challenges all the prophets of Baal to a duel, and they each build an altar and put lots of wood and a sacrifice on it, and but there's no matches. And they said, "You do a dance for your God, and I'll pray to my God, and we'll see who accepts the sacrifice, which altar catches on fire." So the prophets of Baal,
500 of them.
Yeah, 500. They do their whole elaborate liturgy, and they're dancing and cutting themselves and doing all this stuff, and nothing happens.
The blood gushed.
The blood gushed. And then Elijah is like, he tells folks to pour water.
Yeah.
He digs a trench around his altar and pours water all over the wood so it's wet. And if you've ever tried to start a fire with wet wood?
Yes.
Nightmare.
It's awful.
It does not.
I remember one Easter, on the great vigil of Easter, Jamie Russell, who was working here at the time, set a flaming brazier of fire, which he kindled for the great liturgy.
Yeah.
Using two of the biggest, wettest logs you've ever seen in one match. And we might as well have crowded around a cigarette. It was utterly dismal.
That's so good.
And then we said this liturgy, "Thou, O Lord, hast kindled a great flame in the darkness." And it was like, yeah, you've not.
It's like petering out.
It was terrible.
Yeah. So it's hard. But in this case, Elijah prays to the Lord, and fire comes down from heaven and just consumes the sacrifice.
So there's history of Carmel being associated with wicked worship. There's history of God repudiating the wicked worship because all the prophets get killed as well.
Yep.
Which is kind of funny because that was the deal. And
it's the deal.
And so the top, but the Carmel itself was not withered before. God has sent mighty fire from heaven before on Mount Carmel, but all it burned was a bull and some wood and some water.
Yeah.
Now, the actual top of Carmel itself is to wither. The actual mountain will melt. It's an extraordinary. I don't know what wither means. It means make dry.
Make dry.
Be dried up.
Oh, because it's a dry. Yeah, it makes sense. Like a fig tree withers.
It's a metaphor for shame in Hebrew, actually.
Interesting.
To be confounded. So its primary meaning is dry or wither, but its secondary meanings are confound, shame, wither away, clean, or treat utterly and shamefully. So there's this full repudiation of the epicenter of false worship.
Huh.
And it comes from the epicenter of true worship.
I like on our sermon graphic how you, the bulletin covers, how you have the shepherd of Tekoa, but he's on top of Mount Carmel, I guess. Yeah. But he's not at the top of the mountain.
No, he's about 1/3 of the way down.
Yeah, because the top withers.
So he's just outside of the blast radius, as we assume.
It's a very it's a nice little Easter egg.
He's safe.
Yeah, he's safe away from the. I'm not going to go to the top. It looks a little like the cliffs of Dover. I have to say.
I thought so too.
Yeah,
yeah, that's right. No, I mean that's right. Well, there's a lot of Churchillian stuff going on here.
There is.
Yeah, we'll fight them on the beaches.
On the beaches. And we'll fight them in the air.
Yeah. Never
surrender.
In the field.
We will never surrender.
Conflict. For you. And so he also says the pastures of the shepherd's mourn. I love the universal facet of this judgment.
Mountains and pastures.
Highs and lows.
Well, I mean, an earthquake will do that.
Right.
But it takes an act of God.
And so in our graphic here, there's what looks like a sea or a river in front of Mount Carmel. The graphic's an amalgamation of ideas. Mm-hmm. But we do get justice rolling down like a river. And so the sense is here that the lowlands in this image at least have been flooded and the top has been destroyed. And so there's a universal judgment on all things. The highs and the lows are going to be, there's nowhere to go. There's no safe place. There's no bunker that's going to get you safe in your own strength from the gathering storm.
Did you hear that nuclear bunker sales have been like...
Well, that repudiates my thesis
really
from earlier then.
Increasing.
Okay, well, there you go then.
No, really, especially on the with the drone thing in New Jersey. Mm-hmm. Some people were really
Which
afraid.
Happened back a few weeks ago?
Yeah, that was a few weeks ago, but it may or may not still be going on. Yeah. But
you know who's flying them, don't you?
The U.S. government.
Bunker companies.
Bunker companies. That's a genius idea. Oh my goodness. What an ad campaign. Like convince everyone that there's a dirty bomb in New Jersey and then do that. Yeah. But it wasn't a big deal. It turned out that it was,
a galactic empire.
A galactic empire.
And they're nice.
They're really nice. So what was I, where was I even going with that? There's people do have a sense that there's a gathering storm on some levels.
It's interesting how in the same way that some will receive it, some will not. And so when you're in a time of relative peace, it's difficult to see that there's trouble brewing.
Yeah.
But God is bringing this judgment for the purposes of reaching them. Mm-hmm. It's not just an idle thing. It's not just like, let's get them. It's for the purposes of reaching them. And he does. Matthew 25:31, New Testament. Mm-hmm. Matthew 25:31. The final judgment. When the Son of Man comes in his glory and all the angels with him, very reminiscent of the Christmas stuff, then he will sit on his glorious throne and before him will be gathered all the nations, universal. Mm-hmm. And he will separate people from one another as a shepherd. This is here, Jesus being the shepherd, separates the sheep from the goats. As an expert. From a distance, sheep and goats look pretty similar. Mm. Like they behave in the same way. They're mixed flocks. Yeah. They eat the same food. They sit in the same place. I mean, goats are a bit hardier, but they basically look the same.
Yeah.
He will place the sheep on his right and the goats on his left. And the king will say to those on his right, "Come, you who are blessed by my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world."
Yeah.
So a final judgment is coming. when the good shepherd, the great shepherd, will separate people into two groups, and some are in and some are out. And you see the same sorts of motifs going on in Amos. There's a final judgment coming. The judgment that is brewing, the storm that's brewing and gathering, right there and then, is reminiscent or emblematic of the ultimate one that we are still yet to face.
Yes.
And what will you place your hope in? Will you place your hope in the material things of this world, in the relative peace of the age?
Will you just continue on living and pretend like you're not going to someday stand before the judgment seat of God and enter into eternity? I mean, this is like this isn't the most direct correlation. I think for us is not going into our politics or whether whether we're going to have a world war or whether things are going to have material prosperity. The most direct correlation is the thing that is sure to happen is that all of us will face judgment for what we've the many things we've failed to do and the many things that we've done in life.
Right.
And there is a gathering storm as you head, especially as the years tick on and you head toward the end of your life, and it could end any day. And is there anywhere to hide from that?
When the lion is coming, you need to be rescued from the lion.
Yeah.
You need to be rescued from the flood and rescued from the storm and the tumult and the withering and the fire.
So this judgment, ultimately, the judgment upon Israel, was God sent himself, his own son, his very, very God of very God, came into the flesh and as the true Israelite bore the brunt of the storm. Weathered the storm. Yeah,
to be swept and withered and scorched and devoured.
Yeah, those are all pictures of the suffering of Christ.
To stand under the full judgment of God.
Yeah.
It's Christ stands under the full judgment of God and is raised from the dead.
Yeah.
And gives us, therefore, in him, the ability to do the same. So that's the promise. It's very reminiscent of so much that we get in Scripture. Near the beginning in Deuteronomy, Moses says that the people had set up two mountains and to gather the people at the foot of the two mountains. And then from there to consider one mountain to be emblematic of curses and one mountain to be emblematic of blessings. And the people lived with two mountains, Ebal and Gerizim, next to each other. And so these two geographical promontories could function as an aide-memoire, a visual kind of parable for them.
Yeah.
There's good mountain, bad mountain. And half the people stand at the good one, half on the bad.
Yeah.
And God says, choose which one you're going to be. You're going to be with me and be blessed, or against me and be cursed.
Yeah.
And the idea was that the people living under the shadow of these two mountains would look up and behold them all the time and say, am I this or that? And now we have these two mountains of Sion and Carmel. Yeah. It's a theme. It's like a development of a musical theme, which we've seen in many Old Testament books.
All the time. The Bible is the books of the Bible are so interconnected, right? In themes and images, and images always carry a potency and a history to them.
And now this division of sheep and goats by the shepherd, it's another theme of this dividing and who are you and whose side are you on?
Yeah.
And the fascinating twist in this book, and we'll get to it, is that although God speaks from Zion, from Jerusalem, from the good mountain where sheep are, the good mountain where the sheep are does not escape the judgment of God. They're not inherently or automatically good by dint of the fact they were born on the right hill.
Yeah.
And so there's a disruption of the paradigm, or a disruption of the metaphor, or the dichotomy, or whatever word you want to choose, that's taking place in this book as well. It's a disturbing idea that actually God's judgment and storm would be universal. And therefore, we too, even though we are quote-unquote good, blessed sheep, also are going to need a rescue from the Good Shepherd.
Yeah. And so we need to be rescued from God's wrath. And the person who can rescue us from God's wrath alone is God, Jesus, in Jesus Christ. So there's a lot of discussion of the reality of judgment, because I think we need a wake-up call, but we also I think there's a lot to unpack in the person of Christ and how he atones and bears and how he has atoned and has borne that judgment on behalf of all who will hide in him. Yeah. So I like the boat that you have on there. Like that's the one on the cover.
It's symbolic of rescue. The boat is empty in the image.
Will we get in or will we not get in?
And that's the question of the series. That is the question of the series.
Yeah. Well, it's been real. I hope you're enjoying this new year.
We will be.
Yeah.
We've not quite finalised the bulletin cover. There may be some glowing orbs in the sky.
Really? Oh, yeah. Some drones.
UFOs. Who knows? Maybe we'll pivot and do Ezekiel.
We'll see.
Well, this has been a podcast of Christchurch Fox Chapel. We're glad that you would join us. Thanks, of course, for stopping by.
Stay classy, folks.
But mostly,
Stay
thanks
classy.
for stopping by.